Caleb Williams has solidified himself again as the number one pick, probably the Heisman as well, but that won't win him a title. Penn State gave us a scare, and Georgia almost stumbled. Luckily for them, an alien landed in Atlanta about 2 years ago. And who's number one now? My name is Jens, and this is your AFCB College Recap Podcast. Week 5 is in the books. And what a weekend it was. We've had some very high scoring games, some low scorings as well. And Georgia and Penn State scared the shit out of me. Like, not kidding at all. I was legit concerned for a few minutes in the case of Penn State. Alexis, welcome to the podcast. Welcome again. 2 weeks in a row. You're not gone again. Welcome, man. How did you enjoy last weekend?
Hello, Jens. Yeah, it was a very nice weekend with a lot of points on the board that you mentioned. It was a difference to last week when we thought we would get a lot of points and didn't. So yeah, it was nice.
Yeah, I had a feeling that I had to switch between screens all the time because at any given time you had about 3, 4 games being either very high scoring or a very close game, like in case of Notre Dame Duke. And it was difficult to know which one or which game I had to put on my main screen. And I was switching back and forward between a few games. Luckily for us, I had the impression that they were distributed kind of well. So at any given time, you had a maximum of 4 games that you really wanted to see, and that's still kind of feasible. But yeah, you always have these kind of little games that starts to trigger you, like UCF Baylor, that went into a very tricky last drive for UCF and Baylor. It was amazing. I had a very fun weekend, and I hope every single weekend from here on out is going to be exactly the same.
Yeah, and you're mentioning it like UCF Baylor. It's not that it's playoff implications, but it's still a Power Five game, and when you see it's close, you're still triggered to put that game on the screen. And yeah, that's what's nice about college football. I wouldn't watch a close game between the Bears and the Broncos, so it's nice to see that college football is still intriguing us both.
It took us 1 minute to involve the Bears, but we'll probably get to talk about them a little bit later on if we're talking about Heisman implications and the first one or the first pick in the upcoming draft. But let's keep this maybe for the end of the podcast. We're trying to keep this under an hour. Last week we went over 1 hour. I set the over under at 50 minutes, I think. So let's go ahead and make sure that we get below that 1 hour. The first game I want to talk about was maybe one of the games that most of us were excited about. Colorado at USC or USC at Colorado in Boulder. I'm gonna ask you for your takes, but there's probably a full page of them on your screen.
Well, we were a bit less excited after Colorado was blown out by Oregon, and it seemed that way at halftime that we would see the same again because USC was up 34 to 14. They weren't at zero like last week, but still 34 to 14. We thought, okay, this game is over. And even at the beginning of the second half, USC just kept on going. At one moment it was 41 to 20, no, to 14. That was their biggest lead they got in this game. And then Colorado, now actually I have to say USC took the foot off the gas and it got a
Quite a
bit,
bit.
yeah, it got a bit dangerous. I think it highlighted why it's dangerous to think the game is over before it is. Last week we saw Oregon do the same, but their defense kept stopping Colorado. Here at home in Colorado this time, it was a bit different. Colorado came back with 3 unanswered touchdowns, I think, for a final score of 48 to 41. But with almost 6 minutes left, yeah, almost 6 minutes left on the clock, Colorado got the opportunity to really come back in this game because if they scored, they were at 41 points and they could, yeah, they only needed one touchdown to get level again. And they did get to the 41 points, but they took a very long time. They went from 6 minutes on the clock to 1:48, I think, and that's
Yep.
what killed their own chances, their own shot at still winning it. But okay, if USC had kept on playing like they did until the middle of the third quarter, there would have been no problem.
Yeah, indeed. It most crucial part for Colorado in this game was taking too long on that last drive, because you kind of had a feeling that maybe something was possible, although you never had the fully or the full feeling that USC was going to let this one go. But even then, in the end, they took about 5 minutes off the clock, and even the plays they drew up for that drive, it was a few inside runs that take up too much time. Always the case, and it's just a matter of asking yourself if the coaching was maybe apt to do this. Sean Lewis, the offensive coordinator for you for Colorado, some questionable decision making, and we're not going to sit here and say that they were going to win this game or tie this game, because USC was going to push in the gas a little more than in that last drive. But there was a shot, and the crowd was behind them, and everybody was kind of believing in them at that time, or they believed in themselves. Uh, but this game demonstrates to me why this USC team is like this great juggernaut on offense. Um, Caleb Williams having a career high or tying his career high, which with 6 touchdowns is amazing. But this defense is like the complete other way around. And when Oregon took its foot off the gas last week, they kept them to 6 points, and they only scored in the last minute or minutes.
Yeah, let's not forget, of course, USC's defense is a lot worse than Oregon's, so that could be a big part of this. Oregon wouldn't have let them score 41 points, and Shadur Sanders had a good game again, so it's nice to see him get back up a bit again. But yeah, overall, USC deserved to win this one.
Yeah. For me, it was the game that solidified Caleb Williams as the number one pick. Although we didn't need any more convincing of that, he was going to be the number one pick. But now he blew everybody out of the water, and this was also the game for me that solidified him as the Heisman. Michael Penix is for me the second one, but if Williams keeps this up or doesn't botch it in the coming games, he's going to be back-to-back Heisman winner. So a pretty impressive game from him as well. But like I said, it won't win him the title because of that defense. They're just not good enough on defense to keep up with the big boys on top. If we're looking at Georgia, they have this amazing defense with a lot of talent on there. You have Michigan as well, a lot of talent on that roster. Texas keeping Kansas also quite low scoring. Ohio State the same. So I've now mentioned the top 4 teams, and they all have in common that they have great defenses. So
Mm.
to me, it's not a
Um,
playoff team.
no, it's not, and I'm curious to see because they still have Notre Dame, Utah, Washington, Oregon, and UCLA on the schedule. That's a lot of good teams, especially yeah, we know the Pac-12 is stacked, and those are going to be real tests, especially for this defense. The offense will be able to keep up, I think. Of course, with Caleb Williams, they will keep up, but that defense is a problem, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's not it hasn't been a cupcake until up to now. They had a few lesser teams on their schedule, and they had trouble with them too. So I don't think they remain undefeated, and I don't think they're going to lose only one. So whenever you lose two, I think automatically out of the playoffs.
Yeah. Although it is a matter, however, of coaching, I think, in this one, because you can't have that talent on the defensive side in case of USC and not be kind of okay, because you have Bear Alexander on the defensive line. You have Kalen Bullock as well in the secondary. He is one of the top safeties this year. I think he's going to be top 5 or at least top 10 when we're looking at the safety class. So it's an okay defense on paper, but it's just a matter of coaching, I think. Um, I asked our listeners before the podcast, or asked them to raise their questions via either Discord or Facebook, and we've had Kevin um, reaching out to us, and he asks why we thought that USC was never going to be a top four team, and if Caleb Williams could do anything about that. And I think we've kind of answered it. If Caleb Williams would have played defense or could play defense, they probably would be a top four team. But Caleb Williams he can only affect the offense as much as he can. I think he's done the most he can this weekend, but then it's up to the defense to keep them out of trouble. And now they got them a little bit in trouble. And against these greater offenses like Washington is going to be, maybe Utah with Cameron Rising if he comes back in time, that will be a
We really
problem.
need him because without Cam Rising, it's not going to be as
No,
much trouble.
no,
But yeah,
yeah,
even Oregon against his defense, even
yeah,
against
yeah.
Oregon,
I
they
forgot
will
about that
struggle
one.
a lot. So
That defense is probably the best one you have in the Pac-12, and it's maybe not a top tier offense, but it's up there. It's
yeah,
maybe tier
but
two.
let's not forget Caleb Williams will get tested against Oregon's defense.
Yeah, he will.
Last year he was a bit too, but the defense was weaker than this year. So let's see what he can do against them.
Yeah,
I don't know, is it at Washington State or at home? But Washington State could be a problem
yeah,
for this team.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's a lot of a lot of obstacles they still have to overcome if they want to get to those playoffs and that top four, like Kevin asked. And I just don't think they will make it because that schedule is getting harder. They had San Jose State, Nevada, Stanford, and Arizona State before they went to Colorado, and now the real hard part of the schedule is coming up. So nah, I don't think they get in.
yeah. Another high scoring game which kept me on my toes the whole game. Like I was tweeting when the game was happening, and I almost didn't have any time to keep up with the tweets because there was so much happening in that game. It was LSU at Ole Miss, and I think both teams actually put their offenses on the plane, but forgot to put their defense on the plane, because they crossed the 100 points mark in this game, 49-55. Ole Miss won this one in the end, but it's like both teams forgot to play defense, because if you look at the play-by-play on ESPN, it's kind of funny to see there were a total of 5 punts during the game. But if you look at them, what happened and how long those drives took, and what the result was, it's actually pretty funny to see. It's touchdown, 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 field goal, touchdown, and the average is about 2.5, 3 minutes per drive. So very entertaining, and that's why we look at, or why we watch college football, to see these high scoring games. But it's not the kind of games that a team wants to put on tape, because they only want to win, and they want to keep their defenses and offenses in as great a shape as possible. And both teams got now a defense that's in pretty bad shape.
Yeah, indeed. Especially the secondaries. That's where the biggest problem of them was. Like Jaden Daniels threw for 400, a bit over 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. Jackson Dart just a bit under 400 and 5 touchdowns, I think. So they played good. They played very well, but those cornerbacks and those safeties weren't weren't made for defending those receivers. And it's not that it's the best receivers in the league. Okay, you have Neighbors on the LSU side. It's a very good receiver, I know, but I'm not that impressed with anything else. And yeah, it was just weird to see this because last week we were just talking about Ole Miss as being maybe not like we thought, not on offense, not on defense either, but that came true. But we were kind of giving them a bit of criticism on offense too. And it's like in 1 week of time they just fixed it and they went off on LSU, who is still a good team, who we were still keeping as being a good team, even if they struggled.
Still
So
a ranked team.
yeah, still a ranked team indeed. So it's just weird to see that Ole Miss suddenly came out like how do I have to say this?
Guns
Devil in a
blazing.
box, yeah, guns blazing. Um, I thought the O-line of Ole Miss was doing well also because that has been a point of criticism for the last few weeks, and this time they just it seemed like they didn't let anything through. Um, so a high scoring game, but it's not only because of the offenses. The defenses were playing a
Mm.
much bigger role here.
Yeah, but the real star of the game wasn't mentioned yet. It's Quinshon Judkins, the running back of Ole Miss. He ran for about 180 yards. He scored one touchdown rushing. He only had a receiving touchdown, which brought his tally to 180 yards. It was just a masterclass in how to run the ball. And I would advise anybody who's interested in watching film, just put up this game and watch Quinshon Judkins run through the line like it's almost nothing. He had a few breakout plays. His longest run was about 40 yards. So a very impressive game from him. He wasn't on the 200 yard watch that evening, but he came pretty close.
Yeah,
So it's actually perfect game tape for him.
and the 4 games before, he only had 200 yards. So in one game, he just obliterated those four other stat lines. And
Yeah,
here also, the O-line was very important for him.
yeah. We were going to talk about it probably at the end, but I want to raise the conversation now. Is it normal that LSU is still ranked after this week? Because they are ranked 23rd in the AP
Mm.
poll. Why?
Yeah, they did drop 10 places, so it's a very big drop. Um, yeah, I don't think the AP voters are ready to admit that they made a mistake before the season, that LSU was that highly ranked. And of course, it's a ranked loss. Ole Miss was still ranked, so it's a ranked loss, and that always counts a bit more than a loss against a team outside of the top 25. So that's why they're still ranked. But one more loss and it's over for LSU. We're not seeing them back.
Yeah, but let's be honest here. They lost against Florida State at the beginning of the season, in which they looked absolutely horrible. The stat line or the scoreboard won't say it this
Mm.
harsh, but they scored in garbage time. They had this blowout against Grambling, one against Mississippi State, but as we're now seeing, Mississippi State isn't that great of an SEC team right now. They won against a struggling Arkansas, and they struggled themselves in that game, and now they lost against Ole Miss. And although it was a pretty even scoreline, like both offenses put up as many points, just Ole Miss had the last word to say.
And
You
that's
you
maybe why they're still in the top 25 because they scored 49 points on a ranked team.
Yeah, they did against the hostile home crowd. So in that
Yeah.
way, it was kind of impressive. But I think next up is Missouri. That's going to be a tough team or a tough matchup for them. But we already know that the AP voters are SEC favored, and the big guns from the SEC are favored a little bit more. So if LSU wins this one, they're back in the top 20, I think.
Yeah, probably. Just one little question. If you drop LSU, who are you getting in? Maryland? Kansas
Yeah,
State?
probably Maryland. They are up there.
Okay. And
Kansas State is probably the second one you would have to put in.
what about
Some
their fellow SEC West rival, Texas A&M? They're 4-1.
they
LSU
are
is
four
three and
and
two.
one, but they had a pretty bad loss against Miami.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
and they are down a quarterback. Connor Weigman fell to a foot injury last week, I think. So he's out for the season. Max Johnson came in, so he started last year. Had himself a kind of okay, actually a great game. He threw for 210 yards. Um, Let me just pull up the stat line really quick because we don't always have these kind of things open. So he had 210 yards, threw for 2 touchdowns as well. So he rushed as well for 57. So he had himself a good game to come in as a backup quarterback. But it was against Arkansas, and as we already know, it's a 2-3 team right now. Arkansas isn't the best SEC team as well. Just like Mississippi State, they're probably a little bit at the bottom of the SEC, which puts them above average for other conferences. But in the SEC, they're probably not a big contender, or they aren't a big
But
contender, although they have KJ Jefferson and Rocket Sanders in there.
yeah, but if you compare, like Texas A&M also won against Arkansas, they won against Auburn. So those are two SEC West wins. Auburn is Auburn SEC East or is I'm confused here? SEC West, yeah. So
Mm,
they have two wins against the SEC rivals,
mm-hmm.
and LSU only won against Arkansas actually. Okay, Mississippi State. I think Auburn is a bit better than Mississippi State this year. So if you look at the quality wins, they got more and they
Yeah,
have less
yeah.
losses. So
I think the voters mainly still remember the Miami loss, and I think that's still lingering. And they haven't had this game, which would put them in the top 25. Although you could make an argument for them to be in the top 25. Valid question, who you would take it, but my guess would be Maryland, who's
mm,
probably in uh,
yeah, and I think
if they win
they're
next
well
week
deserved.
against
They're
Ohio
des
State.
they deserve it. They deserve it more than Texas A&M in my opinion too because of the what
Mm,
they're doing. But it was just weird to me that Texas A&M 4-1 Texas A&M team is still below LSU who won
who's
against the
three and
same
two?
team.
Yeah, I
Yeah, and I
do
was
rank
3.
them higher than LSU, but if we can only put in one team, to me it's Maryland, not Texas A&M.
Okay.
All right, on to the next game. We're at a very nice pace today, and it's one of the games that was a little bit lower scoring this weekend. Notre Dame against Duke. It was a real battle. Pretty nice game who came down to the wire. What are your 2 cents on this game?
Yeah, it was a nail biter actually because the way they won Notre Dame was very yeah. If you're a heart, if you have problems with your heart, you shouldn't have watched this. But I thought Sam Hartman was maybe a bit disappointing. 15 for 30 on 222 yards. I expect more from him, but
You should expect more from him.
let's still know that it was without 3 of their starting receivers. So they missed 3 starting receivers. That's a big impact, of course, on
Mm,
an offense because you get backups who play a bit in games, but who are not playing every week, who miss a bit of rhythm in their game. So that's an important note to make. Still, I yeah, I just expected more from Hartman in this game. He was
yeah,
important though because of the scramble he made on 4 and 16 on the
mhm.
last drive. Without that, Notre Dame was done. Duke won, but he did, and then Estimate finished it off. But yeah, let's. This wasn't enough for Notre Dame. We all thought Notre Dame was good after last week against Ohio State, and now they have a game against Duke, who's still ranked, indeed, who were still ranked. But we expected them to win by at least 10 points. It's
Or
just
at least
7.
10 convincing points. Now
Yeah,
the
that
difference is
convincing.
seven.
And yeah, it's
Okay, it's a
7. It's
touchdown,
not a
but
big difference, I know, but 10 points is already more. You're just playing more easy. 10 points, at the end of
mm,
the game, they won't get to you. You have a lot of yeah, you're just better. I don't know
mm,
how to put it otherwise. It's just you're better than them at that moment. You can sit back comfortably in your couch and say, okay, we won this game. This
mhm,
wasn't the case. One thing I want to note too was the penalty issues with Notre Dame because they had 12 penalties for 70 yards and a lot of false starts and offsides. And as a fan, we both know how frustrating it is if your offense and defense make those mistakes on at important times in the game.
mhm.
And that's maybe what yeah what got them in trouble against Duke.
Especially since it's a very experienced offensive line. Like you have Joe Alt and Blake Fisher anchoring the wings. Although the inside isn't as great as it's on the outside, but still pretty solid for a Power 5 team. So you would expect better indeed from an offensive line than to commit this many fouls, because it sets you back way too far to be competitive in this game. On the other side of the ball, we had Riley Leonard, the quarterback for Duke, and he's on a first round watch, an early day two watch. I think we can say about him. He first of all, he was injured late in the game.
Last
He had
play.
to last play, in which Notre Dame took over. He went to the sidelines and got himself treated in the blue tent. We got ourselves the news that he will be able to return this weekend or this year, because it's just a high ankle sprain, and we're saying just because it looked a little bit worse at the time of the game. So we're glad he's back, but it wasn't his best game as a Blue Devil. He's below 50% completion percentage, which is something that only Anthony Richardson can get away with. He had himself one touchdown, one interception, QB rating of 46. So all in all, not that great a game from Riley Leonard. He did, however, had himself a pretty nice run. He ran for 88 yards, with his longest one being just over 30 yards. So we know him as a dual threat quarterback. He can make it, or he can make a defense pay with his feet, and he's still a little bit to improve with the arm strength, but he's getting there. He made some great strides from last season to this season, and we've seen it already. But it's just that offense as well. It's not too great an offense if you look at it this game. Although this game is maybe not the benchmark, but the leader in yardage in that game for Duke was Jordan Moore, who had himself a touchdown as well, but he was below 70. And on the season, it's Jordan Moore as well, 3 touchdowns, 313 yards. For a Power 5 team who's being ranked, they can't do anything about it. They do with the talent what they can, but that's probably as well why they can't pull away in a win or in a game like this, because they had the possibility on defense to ice this game. Because as you said,
They,
Sam Hartman has the conversion of fourth, a scramble, and Sam Hartman isn't this best running quarterback we know. Um, so
they did get away with the game against Clemson, so that was they can do it. It's just this Notre Dame offense is a bit better, and yeah, let's still let's not forget that Notre Dame's defense is very good. I was talking about the defense, so that the defense is
mm,
very good. They held Ohio State to 17 points. They held Duke to 14. Okay, Duke, Ohio State is on a whole other level, but it's again 14 points. If your offense scores more, you win. That's what we talk about with Iowa sometimes.
mm,
If that offense was just a little bit better, Iowa would be lights out.
mm,
But here, Riley Leonard, indeed, he didn't have a good game. His only, yeah, what we can say to like temper it a bit is the defense of Notre Dame is very good.
yeah. The last game I want to speak a little bit more about than the other ones is Kansas, the Jayhawks at Texas. It's another one of the ranked games that we had this weekend. It's maybe a hot take. I'm going to have this one in this one. So Kansas won Texas won 40-14, but Texas didn't really convince me that they should be ranked number one, because spoiler alert, it's not like the number one is up for grabs, but it's a little bit more open this season than it was last season. But the Longhorns, they kept Kansas in the game for quite a long time until third quarter, fourth quarter, and they are still ranked fourth, third.
I think
This week, I think it's
it's
third.
third. Everything
Yeah,
remain, yeah.
yeah,
So
everything remained the same. So they went in as a third ranked team. But in this one, they didn't convince me that they should be placed above Michigan, which is, in my opinion, the number one team at this time in America.
It's it's only one game, so
Mm-mm, mm-mm. No, I'm immediately going to pick up on this because they had Wyoming last week and they didn't convince me
yeah,
very much either. So it's
okay.
a combination of
That's
those two which makes me. Hmm,
it's funny. That's typical Texas. But last years, over the last few years, they would have lost this type of game. So it's good
mhm,
to see that they're winning it now. They just have to try and eliminate that from their game because, well, sooner or later it will come back to haunt them, and some team will win. Except if you're TCU from last year, some team will some team will beat you on those mistakes and
mm.
letting them in the game for too long. But it's not worrying me right
No,
now.
no, not at all. It's not like this Texas team is now all of a sudden outside of top 10. They are still top five to me, but they didn't show me why they should be more than third spot in this
Yeah,
ranking. And Quinn Ewers did throw for 300 plus yards. He had himself like this perfect scramble, which went for a touchdown in the first half. Great
mm,
highlight play from him as well. So they have all this talent. Adonai Mitchell had himself a touchdown again. Xavier Worthy is still one of the better receivers in America. He's going to be probably in the first round. So
the
it's not like there's a lack of talent. It's just a lack of maybe interest to blow them out from the get go.
thing is, I'm not convinced Michigan is that good. Okay, they're very good. It's just not that they should be ranked number one. And Georgia isn't convincing me either to be ranked number one, to be honest. So there is no clear number one in my eyes.
No.
And for each of those three that you just mentioned, we could make a case why they could be number one as well.
Hmm.
So I completely get
Yeah.
why it just remained the same
Yeah.
until one of those teams really proves it against another top 25 team. Even if it should be against a top 10 team, and if they really blow them out, like Texas could do it with Oklahoma next week, and the other ones like Georgia or Michigan struggle a bit, then they could take that number one spot. Let's say
Yeah.
if Georgia struggles against Kentucky and keeps it really close like it did against Auburn, and Texas just blows out Oklahoma, I think we could see a switch.
Yeah. Although I do have to say, Michigan had its first game this year in which it convinced me that it could be number one. Because in all the previous weeks, you always had Georgia just a little bit above. But now it's their highest scoring game since the beginning of the season. They scored 41 on
Yeah,
a conference opponent, so that's already quite impressive. Nebraska isn't this bad defense; they're just not great on offense, so they don't score. But they should be okay on the defensive side. And if you hang 45 on them in a hostile environment again, it's for me the first game in which they have shown me that they are worthy of being the first team in the AP poll.
yeah,
But
I get it. Like last week, we said about Michigan, they didn't prove it against good teams. Nebraska isn't a good team, but keeping them to 7 points in their own house
mhm,
and putting them 45 on them, I could say it's impressive. Just that JJ McCarthy, yeah, he's not throwing a lot, so it's heavily depending on the running game, as it should be because they're very good running backs.
yeah,
But that passing, if you get a defense who's making you pass, it could still be a problem.
yeah. Well, that's what we're going to see probably some at some point in this season, especially against Penn State and Ohio State. So those are
Mhm.
the games we're really looking forward to. And maybe who knows, Maryland by the end of the year is still a pretty good team, although they will have played Ohio State. I don't. Do they play Penn State later on in the year?
I don't know. Gonna check. Yeah,
Yeah, I
they're
have to check
playing
it.
Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course, it's their
So by the
conference.
time they could have two losses as well, but those two losses will have come probably against pretty pretty good teams. So winning against Maryland will be a good one for them as well, to solidify themselves as a top four team near the end. They probably won't have lost because they play cupcake schedule. And let's see for Michigan. But as I said, it's the first game in which I was kind of getting excited about
That
this team.
that's actually Maryland's problem. They're always in that conference. They always have to play those three. I think they're hoping for that conference realignment. They were hoping for it.
Yeah, they were keeping their fingers crossed, and at the time when we published the realignments on our socials, I think Maryland took notice of it.
I
No,
think they already knew.
yeah, I think so as well. On to some other games in which was kind of getting scared a bit, and I think the one I was worried me the most, Georgia at Auburn. And I think everybody actually thinks the same after this game. Georgia shouldn't be number one probably after this one. And although you don't need to play your best football, wasn't yet October, you would still expect them to at least show you something that would indicate, okay, we are here. We're here to go back to back to back, and you kind of have this feeling that Georgia just isn't able to. It's probably also pretty difficult to repeat yourselves twice or a third time, in being another champion or going for another championship run.
Yeah,
But they should be able to win this game convincingly. And although you play an SEC rival, it's still Auburn.
yeah, indeed. And I think that's the problem. The three-peat is on everybody's mind, also the opponents, because if you can choose one team to go lights out against as a player and as a team, it's Georgia, because you know
Mm,
you will be put on a people will be talking about you if you
yeah.
can topple Georgia, or if you can even keep it very close, because we
Mm,
are, and a lot of people are talking about, is Georgia really that good this year? So Auburn just did what they wanted to. They wanted to keep this very close,
mm,
or of course they wanted to win, but if you can keep it to 7 points against supposedly the best team there is in football for the last 3 years, that's also good. And the defense was very good of Auburn, and I'm talking about, was very good in keeping Georgia in check, especially Bowers in the first half. He had 2 catches, I think. Of course, in the second
mm,
half, there was nothing to do about him anymore. But Georgia has to keep watch for their running defense, because Auburn just went off on him. I think before this game, um, Georgia just allowed 87 yards a game, but this time they let Auburn score, not score, but put up 219 yards on them. And let's not forget, next week is Kentucky, and Kentucky is a very good running team.
mm.
So if Georgia can fix it by then, Kentucky will have seen this, of course.
Yeah.
So that's a problem.
Yeah, and the points, or most of the points for Auburn, also came off turnovers. So the drives following a turnover for of Georgia. So Carson Beck was intercepted in the following drive. Auburn went to score, and then a little later in the game, when you see it, it's actually the first drive in the second half. Georgia fumbled the ball. Auburn went to score. You have 14 points over there. So their defense made some great stops, but they came off turnovers, and you do have to win the turnover battle. But it's still small remark on those 14 or 20 points we see
One thing to
of
note
Auburn.
here, though, is, I'm sorry to break you off, but Auburn had really horrific third down conversion in this game. They went, I think they converted only 2 out of 12 third downs. That's
That's
bad.
not great.
Yeah. So Auburn did this to themselves on offense. If you convert those third downs, like, let's say 7 out of 12 at least. I don't remember what the yardage was every time. If you convert 7 out of 12 at least, yeah, Auburn might have won this game.
Okay.
Because
Well,
those 7, you convert 7 instead of 2, of course you get first and second downs again. They were good on first and second downs. That running game was very, very nice. Yeah, I think they could have done a lot more if they just converted those downs.
Yeah, but probably one person we should talk about a little more, and you already mentioned him, Brock Bowers, tight end. He's otherworldly, and there's actually it's maybe still an understatement. He is the best tight end, and I've seen people write it down. He's the best tight end in college football history. Not one of them. He is the best tight end. He trumps um, Kyle Pitt, which is the most recent one we can recall. But
Mm.
Brock Bowers is like this alien. He landed on Earth. He landed in Georgia, and he's deciding games, and that's pretty important for them now that they have this target which they can throw to. Carson Beck went over 300 yards, but most of those yards went to Brock Bowers, and he got a lot of those yards for free. Carson Beck, because Brock Bowers is this yard after catch machine. If you look at his total yardage this season, he has about 400. 300 of those came after the catch. So you can add those 300 to the tally of Carson Beck, but it's pure Brock Bowers. He will go probably top 10. Um, he's more of a catcher or receiver than he is a blocking tight end. He's a little bit on the smaller side. If you look at his numbers, and now we're going to mm, don't see this as a hot take, people, but we're just mentioning some numbers. But if you look at it, PFF ranks him as the 40th tight end in pass blocking. So you already know this going in when you're drafting him. He's not going to be the guy who you put like on the offensive line like Darnell Washington, who's blocking everybody and everything. You have to put him or use him as a receiver, and he's not the best receiver as well. He won't be the or if you compare him to other receivers, but he is going to be this unique piece on the offense, which is going to line up across cornerbacks who are going to have to defend the tight end, who's like this physical specimen and who will run away from everybody and who will push everybody away. So
Mm.
maybe he's
Yeah,
even more exciting than Bijan Robinson last year.
that's a hot take. Um, yeah, he may not be the best receiver in pure terms of being a wide receiver, of course, but those yards after catch are just insane. So if you're getting him without Bowers, I don't think Georgia is still unbeaten. So
Yeah.
without Bowers, they've lost a few games this year.
Another game that was pretty close, or at least in the first half. Penn State kind of scared us a little bit. We're not gonna say they scared us for a full game, but they went into halftime 10-10, tied against Northwestern. We're not gonna give them all the credit for playing at home, but it's Northwestern, although they did win against Minnesota last week. But they are probably the worst team in the Power Five, maybe at the time. Do we
They're-
need to draw some conclusions from that first half? Because the second half is skewing what you would think about it. Because if you only look at the scoreboard, 41-13, easy win.
mm,
Most of those points came in the second half.
yeah, of course, we have to take a look at this first half because that wasn't good from Penn State's. Aller wasn't good. He was very inaccurate here. Last week I was saying I saw improvement. This week he's proving me otherwise. So he'll have to do better. And I still believe Penn State has one of the best running back duos there is in the league, but it's not showing right now. I know Allen left with an injury quite early in the game, and I hope he's back. I think he's not injured for too long, or let's hope so, at least because he is needed in this offense. And Singleton, his second running back, yeah, he has no breakout runs this year. Breakout runs, I mean, over 20 yards. We haven't seen him run for that. Why isn't it showing more on with those running backs? That's what I'm asking because these are an essential part of the offense. Before the season, we were talking about those running backs as being the centerpiece next to the offensive line, of course, and Drew Lar, but it's not showing, and that's worrisome. So because that's not showing, everything has to go through Drew Alar and the receivers, and that's not good enough. Penn State needs the whole offense to contribute.
Hmm. Yeah,
Of
that's
course,
true.
yeah, of course they have strong defense who helps them win. That's what happened here. Elite pass rush, a lot of sacks. The D line is very good. So Northwestern didn't know what to do with that defensive side. It's just without that defense, I don't know. Against Northwestern, they would have, but I don't know if without the defense, you're winning a lot of games.
Yeah, and for the next few games, that defense will keep them in, but it's up to the offense to get them out.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, indeed.
against Michigan and Ohio State, defense will be fine. They will be good. Um, but it's
Mm,
going to be that offense
And,
against a pretty good defense of both Michigan and Ohio State.
and let's not forget, you basically get 10 points for free from Northwestern because they make two very weird decisions to go for it on fourth down on their own half. So you get a very short field, one field goal, one touchdown. So you basically got 10 points for free. So 31 to 13 against Northwestern is for sure not good, being Penn State. But next week you have a bye time to fix this. I think they can use it actually before those games against Ohio State and Michigan. Michigan is a lot further in the season. The Ohio State is coming up, and it's time to work on that offense being a little more coherent with each other. They have to find each other more on offense. The offensive line has to learn to work with those running back duo because that's where the key is for this offense. And of course, Eller has to be a lot more accurate than he did this weekend.
Yeah. I asked you last week to rank the teams in the Big Ten, and then you said I'm ranking Ohio State first. Secondly, Penn State. Now I'm and then ranking Michigan
Mm.
third. Did your Is your answer going to change if I ask you again today?
It was very close when I ranked those three teams that way. So I think this week I have to change Michigan with Penn State. I'm not putting them first in Big Ten. I'm not ready to do that because Ohio State is still better in my eyes. But yeah, I would put them before Penn State after this weekend.
Yeah, I have. I'm going to do the same thing as you. I'm gonna move Michigan, but I had them at 2, so I'm moving them up one spot. Um, because as I said today or last weekend, they proved to me that they actually are a pretty good team. Which I mean, everybody saw them, but nobody noticed how good they could be. It's always like this assumption you had to make because you know the pieces they have. Roman Wilson, I don't know if you saw this Randy Moss catch he had in the end zone. Pretty amazing highlight in which he actually held on to the ball via a defender's helmet. Um, you have Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, the running back duo, and JJ McCarthy. Trevor Sycamore had him as a fifth quarterback in his latest mock draft. He had him going to the Vikings at 5 because he is this prototypical quarterback that most NFL teams need. So that's why I'm putting them above Ohio State. And while Ohio State has a better wide receiver room, you still need a quarterback to feed those skill players.
Mm.
And Kyle McCord is just ranked lower than JJ. And last weekend, he showed us actually that he is the better quarterback and he's the best quarterback maybe in the Big Ten.
Um, I find it hard to say that right now because yeah, I just told you McCarty isn't passing a lot, and that's worrying me. Um, Not to say he's bad, of course, but he's not 5 on my list. I can't name them. I can't name everyone who I would put before him right now.
Before
I've,
JJ.
yeah, yeah, I would have to think a bit about that, but I don't think he's fifth. He's better than McCord, of course. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I'm still putting Michigan on two.
yeah. I'm just having a look at the PFF big board now, and that's the last thing we're going to say about it because we're almost at the hour mark. Quarterbacks rankings. So we're using PFF now, as the official guidelines. So we have Caleb Williams at 1. Drake May is third on the big board, but second quarterback. Bo Nix, third quarterback at 25. Michael Penix is the fourth at 29. Riley Leonard, he's the fifth quarterback at 34. And then you have JJ just before Shadur, Michael Pratt, Quinn Ewers, Jaden Daniels, Spencer Rattler, and Jordan Travis. All right, wrapping this up. Heretjan had a question about, now that we've had all the teams or most of the teams passing by, after these 5 weeks, which team is surprising you and which team is kind of letting you down? If you have to say one, I think the team letting us down is pretty clear. So we'll try and have 2 different answers. So go ahead.
Okay.
I'll choose another one, except for then LSU.
Yeah, okay, you know me. Indeed, for me it's LSU. Could have said another one, but I'll leave that to you. LSU, because of what we were thinking about them before the season, and what we are seeing now is not what we expected. It's 3-2. They are 3-2. Losses against Florida State, you can lose to them, but not that big. And their loss this weekend against Ole Miss was just bad on defense. So they are disappointing us. We were thinking about them as an outsider for the playoffs, and they're just not.
Nope. I'm actually curious now to know your team that you were going to say. I think it's either going to be Tennessee or it's going to be North Carolina. I would take North Carolina as my team. That's a little bit disappointing, and you would have to say that disappointing. It's Drake May. You expect a lot more from him, and this team is reliant on him to be great, and they are 4-0, so they are still atop the ACC, but they're not a top dog in the ACC. I don't see them having a pretty easy game against Clemson, who's having a bad season. Clemson could have been actually amongst this, but
That
it's
was my
too.
team I was going to say.
Yeah. Um,
But go ahead on North Carolina.
yeah, Clemson has this great linebacker duo. They have Will Shipley. Otherwise, Nate Wiggins on cornerback. You have some individual pieces to be excited about, but you could have maybe expected them to be a little bit less. But North Carolina, to me, they were one of the teams who was going to contend as top dog in the ACC, and they just don't give me the impression that they are able to keep up with Florida State. That they are going to beat Clemson for sure in the second to last week. So
I just want to add something to this because I wasn't really not expecting you to say North Carolina, because for me they are a bit the opposite. They are a bit overachieving. Before the season, I heard everybody, not me, but I heard everybody say every podcast or a preview that North Carolina wasn't going to do what they did last year. They weren't going to be that long unbeaten, and in the 4 games they had right now, yeah, there were opponents that were seen as a loss, and that's why I'm thinking the other way around.
you didn't have opponent. I mean, you had opponents who were seen as difficult opponents, but not as a
Yeah,
loss.
not as losses indeed. Yeah,
And they
indeed.
had trouble against those opponents. And we're talking about Minnesota. We are talking about Appalachian State. And although the scoreline against Minnesota isn't saying or telling what I'm saying now, it's more. It's the same as Penn State. They
But
struggled in the
they
beginning.
have improved in those games compared to last year. Last
Yeah.
year it would have been a difference of 1 score. This year
Well,
they are getting a bit more distance with their opponents, except for App State. But
yeah.
let's see what they do this weekend against Syracuse. Maybe I have to change my opinion.
Yeah, it's just I expected Drake May to be better and this team to be a more convincing, maybe top 10 team. So that's
I agree on
because I
Drake
had
May.
such great expectations actually for this team coming into the season that they are kind of maybe letting me down. And I didn't have the opportunity or didn't have the opportunity to take LSU as you did.
Let's
But
let's see what they do. I love the Bayern this weekend.
yeah, indeed. Heisman race. Do we have to talk about this?
We can talk about it 1 minute. It's Caleb Williams for now. Everybody knows that after 6 touchdowns. It's not that Penix was disappointing, just had a bit less touchdowns this weekend than we're used to. But yeah, with 6 touchdowns, you're the clear number one at the moment.
Yeah. And I think in the bookies world that Quinn Ewers is ranked third, Bo Nix is a close fourth. But to me, Heisman race, that race has been run.
Nah, not yet, because he still has a lot of marquee games to go. It depends if he struggles or not. But for now, he's a clear number one.
Dirk said that Caleb Williams should sit out the season. Would he?
No. If he does, USC is fucked.
Yeah, they are. But if you're playing for
And
the
if
first pick,
yeah,
you could sit
okay,
out. Jackson
he,
Smith and
yeah,
Jigba did the same.
no
He had an
problem,
injury and he remained at the sidelines.
no problem. But then he's not number one in the Heisman.
Mm.
He won't win the Heisman then.
What has to happen with Michael Penix? So he's the Heisman, or is it more Caleb Williams letting everybody down?
Yeah, Michael Penix should be lights out from now on if he just wants to get back on the number one spot.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Williams has to struggle a bit. I don't see him being bad every game. So he has to struggle a bit against like an Oregon, like Washington. That game will be important for them. Washington USC as their direct matchup. Penix has to be has to be better in that game if he wants to get back.
Mm. All right, I see Alexis struggling with his health. I'm going to take over on this one. Last topic of tonight, the AP poll. Notable movements we saw after last weekend. Utah dropped 8 after losing to Oregon State. LSU dropped 10 after losing to Ole Miss. Kentucky is a new face, as well as Louisville, who's coming in at 25. Two newcomers means two losers. In this case, it's Kansas. They were ranked 24th, but after losing to Texas, they are out. Florida as well. Florida was ranked 22 after their win against Tennessee, but they lost at Kentucky 14-33. So now they are out again and probably not to be seen again in the coming weeks, unless some crazy shit happens. And we know the AP voters are in big favor of SEC teams doing well, but normally Florida is going to be out. One take I still want to discuss, and we have 1 minute and a half before we will wrap up. Is there a scenario, Alexis, in which there is no SEC team in the playoffs?
Very difficult. I don't think the AP is ready to do that. And then, yeah,
What needs to happen?
what needs to happen is that in the Pac-12, you would have two teams, yeah, one unbeaten team and the other one that just lost to that unbeaten team and wins everything else. Otherwise, I don't see it happening. And I don't see it happening, actually. Georgia will make the playoffs. If it's not Georgia, it's the winner of the championship game, the SEC championship game.
And who's that going to be?
That is another debate. Ole Miss actually has the easiest schedule. I don't think it's Ole Miss. Yeah, it's probably going to be Alabama.
In the end, Alabama always remains. All right, on that bombshell, we will wrap up the podcast. We are just below 1 hour. We are below the over under. So people who bet money on it, on the over, congrats, you won tonight. Wrapping this up, Alexis, thank you very much for being here again. We'll see you next week. Everybody who's listening in the car, during exercises, thank you for joining us and keeping with us for about an hour. We'll see you next week. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.